Steam Next Fest has arrived once more, and there are hundreds of demos for upcoming games. I've been blasting through as many as I could to find a few to pick out to share that I think are pretty cool. Of course, we're mainly talking strategy, but there's a few more genres sneak in because games are fun. Oh, and for basically all of these games, the demos are available until the 12th of February, so if you want to check them out, do it fast. Now let's waste no more time and dive into some games. Everywhere I go, I see Hooded Horse. So of course they're here to kick off the list with Breachway. This is one I've been excited about for a while. It's a roguelike deck builder where you play as a small ship trying to make its way through a dangerous solar system. The core gameplay loop is making your way through the map, surviving combat encounters, and here's where the game sets itself apart. Each card costs a certain amount of energy, and there are 3 types. These levels must be managed to make sure you can use the cards you need, and you can change your reactor production each turn to keep this where you need it. For example, weapons need a lot of red, but shields need green, so you can technically put all of your power to weapons and use all the attack cards you want, but if the enemy ship launches an attack back at you, there's not really much you can do to stop it. It's a great system, and the steady progression from cards post-battle, as well as any shops you find along the way, keeps things interesting and varied from run to run. Having a selection of different starting ships, equipment, and even crew members with special abilities gives this one a lot of replay value to find a loadout that works best for you. This is another one of those that'll end up living on my Steam Deck for a quick run when I have 15 minutes. aka when sitting on the toilet till my legs go numb. But if you're looking for something a lot more base build and tribal, then maybe this next game from the sponsor of today's video, Starbreeze, might be for you. If you're into small scale builders and survival, then the Tribe Must Survive will be right up your street. It's a little bit like if Banished was sent back to the Stone Age and also had a little bit of Lovecraftian horror thrown in for good measure. Not only do you need to set up the usual food, shelter, and general resource economy these games are known for, you also need to make sure you are totally on top of keeping your tribe well lit and stocked with firewood. If your people stray too far into the darkness, they're in danger of losing their sanity if they're lucky. If they're unlucky, they can be taken by the shadows completely, losing them forever and draining the sanity of all those left behind, sending you into a bit of a spiral. This can be an incredibly challenging game, forcing you to stay on top of everything to keep your tribe from spiraling into chaos. Don't worry though, that spiral is part of the process, as this is aiming to be a roguelike experience where you learn through failure until you find a strategy that works for you. It's unforgiving, but once you master it, you'll be able to thrive in this horrific landscape and lead your tribe to safety again. As I said at the start alongside all the others, this demo is live until the 12th, so check it out and give it a wishlist if you're at all interested. It really helps the developers a lot more than you might think, and it's totally free to do. It's launching into early access on the 22nd later this month and for $20, so it won't be long before you can get your hands on a much more fleshed out version. One last thank you to Starbreeze for sponsoring this video. But if you want to try something a little bit more futuristic, then maybe Homeworld 3 will be more your speed. This is probably the most well-known game on this list, and I've even covered this as one of my most anticipated strategy games of the year. And in the demo you can play around with the roguelike sandbox game mode called War Games. For some reason it tries to railroad you into multiplayer, so I'm not sure if they're hoping for this to be a major focus, but either way I played solo and went through the tutorial and a couple of missions, and it's pretty cool. It's all real time with different objectives for each mission, so as soon as you load in, you need to be ready for anything. Enemies come out of nowhere, and if you're not ready for them, they'll take you down fast. Each mission you have to send out resource harvesters to keep a stream of income and use that to create a fleet to push back local enemies and be prepared for more. Overall, the gameplay felt pretty solid. Controls were a little bit wonky as controlling units in a 3D empty space is a little bit finicky, but aside from that, units were responsive and you could get pretty granular with what you wanted to do with formations and approaches to combat. It's very intense and you need to be on your toes since enemies coming out of nowhere can quickly end your run if you're not ready for them, since it'll take your units quite a while to get across these large maps. The spectacle of combat is pretty rad, especially since all the combat is realistically simulated ballistics, so you can quite literally see the projectiles streaming towards enemies and can tell if they hit or not. I'm excited to play more of this one, especially once the full story campaign comes out, since I feel that'll be a better way to get to grips with the game, but what's here now is good fun, if a little bit challenging. Oh, and it looks stunning, like one of the best looking strategy games I've played in a minute. Speaking of looks, this next game has one of the cutest art styles of anything I'm showing off today. Rusty's Retirement is going to be the thing that every streamer has running in the background. It's an idle farming game where you place crops for Rusty to water, harvest, and convert into cash and biomass. The thing that sets it apart from other idle games is that it only takes up a small portion of the bottom of your screen, so you can have this thing run in the background and check in every now and then to replant and buy some new buildings and bots. Speaking of which, over time you can upgrade the farm with more fields, biomass generators, and robots to help Rusty maintain everything, and you can even eventually upgrade these robots to make them better at their job. It's not really a hardcore automation optimization game since it's so idle and casual. Just make a farm you like the look of and can look after itself, and then come back to it every now and then to give it a round of upgrades. It's just nice, solid fun, and very relaxing. My only complaint is the day I played it, I didn't really do much work because I kept getting distracted and going back to my farm. Speaking of distracted, this next game I played for nearly an hour and it felt like 5 minutes. Batro is a roguelike deck builder poker game. It's amazing that no one has thought of this yet, but it's finally here and is a whole lot of fun. You play poke hands to try and win the required amount of chips in as few hands as possible. Instead of playing against others and betting like traditional poker, you're instead rewarded chips based on the values of the cards you play, multiplied by the type of hand as well as any jokers. In between round, you can buy these jokers in the shop using any money you earned, and these normally multiply your hands, giving you massive amounts of chips for playing certain hands. There are also tarot cards, which can change the value or suit of cards in your deck, as well as augmenting certain cards to change their type. For example, a foil will then gain bonus chips whenever it's played. Basically, you're upgrading your deck of cards to allow you to score more points and beat the harder levels. There are tons of cards to discover as well as different starting decks, and I'm incredibly excited to get my hands on the full game. I can see this being another staple of my Steam Deck when we get a full release, like next week. And if you like combos that feel like they should already exist but for some reason don't, then how's about Crown Wars: The Black Prince? Now, if I was to describe this in one sentence, it's kind of like medieval XCOM. You control a small squad with each member having their own class and set of abilities. You have the Knight, which is quite tanky but deals a lot of damage in melee, the Alchemist, which is more support with heals as well as area debuffs and damage for enemies, the Archer, which is obviously a lot of damage from a ranged, and the Beastmaster, which can bring an animal companion and works best alongside them. From what I can tell, your kingdom is pretty much in ruin and you're going to have to go on missions to rebuild it to its former glory and take out the guys that destroyed it in the first place. The gameplay loop is going to be sending out squads to complete missions for resources and power, leveling them up to make them more powerful so they can do harder missions, for more rewards, etc, etc. This one was really cool. XCOM is one of those games that I do find fun but suck at a lot, and this looks to keep up that trend. In just a couple of missions, I managed to almost kill a squad while struggling to reach the end, and that's fine. The combat all feels great. Of course, percentages will screw you over, but hey, that's all part of the fun. Each class feels distinctly different to use, and melee having a much stronger focus is refreshing compared to XCOM. I think for this one to survive in the long run, the base building, which I didn't really get to mess with, will need to be tight and plenty to do outside of missions, and the class upgrades will need to be interesting rather than just stat upgrades. If they can nail down these two things, I think this has a huge potential to be a really great game, since I don't really know of anything else like it. However, one type of game that I know I love is automation, and Oddsparks scratches that itch perfectly while still putting a unique spin on things. Oddsparks, an automation adventure, is a much more casual approach to automation than something like Satisfactory or Factorio. Instead of making this giant sprawling factory, you're instead making cute little production lines manned by these little guys called Sparks. So far in the demo, it's mainly completing quests for people in a nearby town, so I'd be interested to see what the late game looks like with more complex products. Still, it was a whole lot of fun to send my dude flying over to Man a Machine to harvest nearby resources. The way you summon them to follow you around and fling them wherever you need them makes this like an automation-based Pikmin game, but I've really been enjoying it so far. If you're really into the granular optimizing aspect of automation games, this might leave you wanting more, but if you want a cute looking game with a casual bit of automation, I think you'll really enjoy this one. Add on a story to keep you progressing, and this is shaping up to be one complete package. The 24th of April is the release date for this one, so get wishlisted if you like cute stuff and automation. But if you're instead looking for a light bit of horror and scavenging, then maybe Pacific Drive will be more up your street. Now yes, this isn't really a stretch game, but it is a very interesting game that I was already excited about before I knew it was coming in next fest. The elevator pitch is you're stuck in an American national park that's been overtaken by some sort of anomaly, and to survive, you'll need to repair and upgrade your car using resources scavenged in progressively more dangerous parts of the map. The demo here only lets you go out into the first zone, which is relatively safe, but the small amount I played, I really enjoyed. The story is mainly told from voices over the radio as well as reading materials you find out in the world, but weird contained apocalypses like this are always fun to me, so I'll be interested to see where it takes the story. The scavenging felt decent, with me mainly searching abandoned structures and scrapping abandoned vehicles for parts to fix up my car. It does start off pretty poor with slow speed and awful handling, so I'd be excited to get further into the upgrade tree to see what you can do to make it a lot better. In scavenge zones, there are threats in the form of these weird drone things floating around, electrical towers which will arc to you if you get too close, and radiating threats which drain your health over time, and many more. This first area wasn't too hard, but I can see this getting a lot more challenging later with more of these covering the map. It wasn't really scary, but there are some tense moments when you see one of them coming and desperately try to start the car to get away. Overall, I'm really looking forward to this one when it drops later this month. Intriguing story and engaging gameplay loop. What's not to love? However, if you're instead hoping to travel back in time to the days when you enjoyed powder games, then maybe Infest will be just for you. Now let me take you back for a moment. It's 2011 and I'm a young boy playing flash games like Powder Game. This is basically a roguelike deck builder that's also Powder Game. Each level is made in a gorgeous pixel art style with a bunch of simulated powders strewn around the map that can affect how each level plays. Oil, for example, can be set on fire for bonus damage on enemies, but water can put fire out, halting your damage significantly. Your attacks are almost all powder based, so you can spread acid throughout the map or block enemies in with ice. It introduces a great level of randomness to each level, where you not only have to think about what cards to use to beat enemies, but how you can use them on this specific map to get the win. It's a genius idea that I really love, and, if you're like me, this will be a very nostalgic experience to play. The progression and deck building is decent enough, with each card upgrade changing how they play, such as more projectiles and stronger effects. I also love how you aim everything rather than just playing cards. It adds another layer of strategy, since you have to make sure you're going to be able to hit your targets a lot more. Add on the fact that the map is constantly evolving in real time and you're under quite a bit of time pressure to land your shots just right for maximum impact. This one is coming Q2 of this year, and another one I'd be happy to have on my Steam Deck from day one until the end of time. And for our last game, if you instead prefer to get your hands on the action, that you become the actual bullets, then you should check out Children of the Sun. This game is baller as hell. Not sure what the story is, but the art style here is next level great. If I had to put this into a genre, I'd call it a puzzle game more than a shooter, but you are technically shooting dudes, so don't worry, you can get your daily hits of violence that you've evolved to need. So you load into a level and can walk around the enemies in the center, clicking at any time to zoom in and either take a shot or mark enemies. Once you fire, if you hit an enemy, you can then re-aim the bullet to take out all enemies in one chain. This starts off easy but quickly ramps up in difficulty, requiring some real outside of the box thinking to get the win. Later, you unlock the ability to adjust mid-flight, adding even more layers of complexity, and all in all, it's a fun, satisfying experience to work out each level and see your path at the end. You are then ranked against all other players on how fast you get there, but, you know, I'm just going to pretend that we haven't seen that. I'm really interested to see how the late game of this one plays out, with even more enemies requiring even more complex maneuvers. Overall, this is a great, casual, puzzling fun with a great art style and satisfying gameplay. Speaking of satisfying, I hope this video satisfied your need to check out some game demos. Please consider giving these a try and wishlisting any you enjoy. It really does mean the world to the devs, most of which are smaller teams. If you want to find all of these games and check out my Steam creator page, linked in the description, I'm going to be keeping a list of all Next Fest games featured on the channel, as well as reviewing basically everything I play. Let me know in the comments any demos that you've been enjoying this Next Fest. Like, subscribe, and if you want more info on upcoming games, then check out this video here to see some of the strategy games I'm most excited about.